On the day Isla received her husband's wedding invitation, and she wasn't the bride, she didn't cry. She showed up. Not to beg but to burn everything down. What Logan never knew. The quiet wife he discarded was the heir to the country's most powerful empire. And she didn't just come to stop the wedding, she came to end the Carter legacy. The plane touched down just after noon. By 12:42 I was back at the villa. Heels off, blazer draped over the bar stool and silence stretching beautifully through every sunlit corner of the home. 4 days in Singapore. 72 sleepless hours negotiating a merger no one else on the board could close. I was done. I was drained. I wanted exactly one thing. A hot shower and jasmine tea in absolute quiet. Instead I found an envelope. It wasn't tucked into the mail pile by the front desk. It wasn't in the hands of a staff member. It lay deliberately placed, dead center on the marble foyer. Cream-colored, elegant, sealed in wax. The Carter family crest gleamed from the stamp in gold. My stomach curled. Not with fear but with instinct. I picked it up, opened it, and read the words that unstitched something deep in my chest. Mr. Logan Carter and Ms. Riley Vaughn. Invite you to join them in celebrating their wedding. I stared at the name printed beside his, Riley Vaughn. His secretary. My hands went still. My mind oddly calm. It wasn't shock. Not exactly. More like confirmation. The signs had always been there. The late nights. The calls he took in the bathroom. The sudden shift from cold detachment to outright contempt. It hadn't mattered to me because I'd long stopped expecting anything from Logan Carter. But this, a wedding, while still legally married to me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just reached for my phone and dialed. He answered on the second ring, his voice impatient. What now? I just received a wedding invitation, I said calmly. Silence. Then a lazy, almost amused sigh. Guess Riley got carried away. I didn't speak. I waited. It's real, he added as if I were slow. We're getting married. And before you start playing victim, Riley's already had my child. The cold in his voice was deliberate. Like he'd been waiting to throw that sentence at me. You're still my husband, I said. Only legally. Not in any way that counts, he sneered. My father forced this marriage. You were a formality. A placeholder. He always assumed I came from a modest background, some respectable family his father did business with once. He never asked much beyond that. And I never offered. That was the agreement. My identity was not public knowledge. Not entirely. I went by my mother's surname, Monroe, which meant nothing to him. I never flaunted my lineage. Never brought it up. Never used it as a weapon. Because when my father, Victor Monroe, the most powerful businessman in the country, arranged this marriage 3 years ago to stabilize the crumbling Carter Group, we agreed I would keep my identity buried. Let him believe you're an ordinary woman, my father had said. That's the only way we'll see who he really is. So I did. I signed the marriage papers. I lived in silence. I stayed behind the scenes. And Logan mistook silence for smallness. Riley gives me something you can't, he continued, each word crueler than the last. A real family. A child. And she didn't come with conditions. I held the phone to my ear, leaned back into the leather chair in the study, and stared out at the garden I had designed myself, the one he never noticed. Then I said, I'm coming over. You're not welcome here, he snapped. I hung up. And I drove. 25 minutes later, I walked into the lobby of Carter Group. No appointment. No assistant trailing behind me. The receptionist stood quickly. Mrs. Carter, I think he's in a meeting. Good, I said. So am I. He tried to stop me. She failed. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the executive office. Logan turned. Riley straightened. They were standing close. Too close. Her hand was on his chest. His tie was loose. Her lipstick wasn't. His eyes widened. Isla. I didn't let him finish. Slap. He staggered slightly. Tuck. Slap. The second hit was sharper. More direct. His cheek burned red. The entire room stilled. I gave you 3 years, I said, voice low. I gave you protection, silence, a name worth more than you ever knew. I endured being ignored, humiliated, lied to. And this is how you repay me. You're insane, Riley gasped. No, I said, just done. I turned without another word and left. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't stumble in the car. I didn't even blink. Because I wasn't broken. I was wide awake. It was just past dusk when I returned to the villa. The silence inside was soothing now, like a farewell before a storm. I had packed only the essentials. A black carry-on, my passport, and a box with old letters I couldn't part with. I was just zipping it shut when the sound of stiletto heels echoed through the entrance. Riley Vaughn walked in like she owned the place. Behind her trailed 3 Carter Group staff. One holding swatches, another a blueprint tablet, the third measuring curtain length. "Move faster," she barked. "This living room needs to be cleared before the decorator arrives." I stepped out of the hallway. "Riley," I said calmly. "What do you think you're doing?" She glanced over with smug amusement. "Didn't Logan tell you? He transferred the deed." She waved a green file folder, the official stamp glaring from the top page. "This villa's mine now." She looked around proudly. "Always loved your taste. Don't worry, I'll keep the art. Maybe rename the estate." I didn't move. "You've been circling him since the beginning, haven't you?" "Please," she scoffed. "You weren't exactly competition." I studied her carefully. "Not with hate. Just calculation." "You know," I said softly, "you never once asked yourself who I really am." She smirked. "I don't care. You're nobody now." I smiled faintly. "And yet you've spent all day moving into my house." I wheeled my suitcase to the door. She laughed behind me. "Where will you go, Isla? You've got no home. No man. No power." I didn't answer. Because she was wrong on all 3 counts. The taxi ride was quiet. The city outside blurred into streaks of white and gold. Logan Carter thought I was a nobody. He never once Googled me. Never questioned why his father's most desperate business lifeline had such unwavering terms. He never knew that the name Monroe, my mother's name, was a shield. That behind it stood an empire capable of erasing him. But he would learn. And so would she. The Carter Group building stood tall against the night sky, its name glittering across the tower in bold silver letters. For 3 years I had walked in and out of these doors as the CEO's wife, unacknowledged and invisible. Tonight I wasn't walking in as his wife. I was walking in as a woman delivering an end, the kind of end he wouldn't be able to erase. The ride to the 52nd floor was suffocatingly silent. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored elevator doors. Not the woman Logan once ignored, not the shadow who waited silently at galas. I was done with silence. Done with dignity at the expense of truth. As the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, I stepped onto the executive floor without hesitation. The receptionist jolted from her chair. "Mrs. Carter. Mr. Carter isn't available for." I ignored her. Each step across the polished floors echoed like a slow countdown. My fingers clenched around the crisp folder in my hand. Inside were 2 copies of the divorce papers. One for him, one already signed by me. And tucked inside, nestled between the pages, was the platinum wedding band I had worn quietly for 3 years. No more. I didn't knock. I pushed open the heavy door to Logan's office and stopped. He was there. So was she. Riley Vaughn. Half undressed, hair mussed, skirt bunched at her waist, straddling him on the edge of his desk. They didn't even notice me at first. That's how lost they were in their shameless tangle. So sure I wouldn't walk through that door, so sure I'd stay where they left me. The folder in my hand crinkled as I tightened my grip. Logan glanced up mid-thrust, his body still against hers, and froze. Riley gasped, pushing him back and fumbling for her blouse. "Oh my God." Logan cursed and stood up, quickly adjusting his trousers, rage building in his face as he moved to the side of the desk. "What the hell are you doing here?" I stepped into the room and shut the door behind me. "I came to deliver something," I said calmly, even as my heart pounded like war drums in my chest. Riley was still buttoning her shirt. "You could have knocked." "I don't knock," I said coolly. "Not anymore." Logan sneered, fixing his collar. "If this is about the villa, save it. It's already." I didn't let him finish. With one sharp movement, I threw the folder of divorce papers straight at his chest. He caught it instinctively, looking stunned. And then I pulled off my wedding ring and flung it at his face. It struck his cheek and clinked onto the marble floor. "Sign them," I said, my voice like cut glass. "Now." Logan stared down at the ring, then back at me. His confusion gave way to irritation. You've really lost it, haven't you? 3 years, Logan, I said, stepping forward. 3 years of waiting for you to treat me like more than a placeholder. 3 years of smiling through every excuse, every insult, every silent night. Riley muttered something under her breath, but I didn't even glance at her. You couldn't even tell me yourself, I continued. You let your secretary send me a wedding invitation to your next big lie. Logan scoffed. It's over, Isla. Why make a scene? We both knew what this marriage was. No, I said quietly. You assumed what it was. You assumed I'd stay silent forever. You assumed I'd let you throw me away. He looked at the papers in his hands. You already signed? Yes. He flipped through the pages. And the ring too. How thoughtful. I tilted my head. Don't flatter yourself. It's not sentiment, it's closure. Riley finally found her voice. Why are you even here, Isla? Isn't this embarrassing for you? I turned my gaze on her, not angry, not jealous. Just calm. You walked into my home. You paraded your child like a trophy. And now you think you're the winner. I shook my head. Riley, you're standing in borrowed shoes. And the man you're so proud of, I looked back at Logan. He was only ever loyal to himself. Logan's jaw clenched. You're nothing without the Carter name. I let out a small laugh. You'll find out soon enough who I am without it. His brow furrowed just for a second. Is that a threat? No, I said. It's a promise. Then I turned to the door, paused, and added without looking back. You've just lost the only person who ever protected your name. The office door slammed behind me. The silence on the executive floor was louder than the closing door. Staff had heard. I didn't care. Let them gossip. Let them speculate. They would know soon enough. The press would get the news by morning. Logan Carter's wife had filed for divorce the day before his wedding. And when that headline broke, I would be nowhere near it. Because Logan had taken everything I gave him and gambled it on a secretary who thought a title made her untouchable. And in doing so he had created the one thing he never expected. An enemy with everything to lose, and now nothing to hide. The morning of Logan Carter's wedding dawned bright and cloudless, almost offensively cheerful. A day most women would avoid, drown in tears, or escape from entirely. But I didn't leave the city. I placed an order instead. It arrived just past 9, hand-delivered to the hotel suite with a note of confusion from the courier, who likely assumed it was a mistake. A large, elegant funeral wreath. White lilies, pure and cold. Black ribbon etched with silver letters that spelled, "To the death of integrity." I had it loaded into the back of a matte black sedan, slipped into a sleeveless silk gown the color of dusk, and drove straight to the venue. Let them think I was unhinged. Let them gasp. Today wasn't about revenge. It was a requiem. For everything I had buried quietly, and everyone who thought I wouldn't rise. The wedding was held at a private estate just outside the city, rented for the day. Carter Group had spared no expense, from the imported orchids lining the aisle to the rented grand piano at the entrance. Guests glittered in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Cameras flashed. Laughter floated under the canopy. And then I arrived, heels clicking against the polished white marble, holding the wreath like a crown of thorns. The moment I crossed the archway, the noise died. Every head turned. Gasps sucked the oxygen from the space. Isn't that Isla Monroe? She actually came. What's that in her hands? That's not a gift. That's... Oh my God. It's a funeral wreath. I smiled politely at a woman who stared, mouth open, clutching a mimosa like a lifeline. My stride didn't falter. My gaze didn't shift. All around me were people who had once pretended I didn't exist. Today they couldn't ignore me if they tried. Riley Vaughn stood at the front of the garden, surrounded by photographers, beaming in a lace illusion gown that didn't suit her, holding a glass of champagne she clearly hadn't earned. Her eyes landed on me and widened. I watched her lips freeze mid-smile. She shoved the champagne flute into a waiter's hands and stormed toward me in her designer heels. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper as she stepped directly in front of me. "You invited me," I said with pleasant surprise. It would have been rude to decline. "You're holding a wreath." Her eyes darted to the flowers. "Are you crazy?" I tilted my head. "You're the one marrying a man who forgot to divorce his wife before printing invites." I will have you thrown out. Really? I asked sweetly. Because so far no one's moved. Not even the security. She stepped closer, dropping her voice. You're pathetic, Isla. I offered her the wreath with both hands. Then consider this my gift. And I threw it at her feet. The wreath hit the marble with a soft but resonant thud, the sound of flowers meant for grief, not joy. Gasps erupted around us. Cameras clicked faster. Riley's face flushed a violent shade of red. You're insane, she barked. Get her out. I raised a hand. I've spent 3 years being quiet, I said loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. 3 years playing the role of the invisible wife while the groom played family with someone else's secretary. Murmurs rippled like static. And today, I added, stepping back to admire the wreath, I just wanted to mark the death of self-respect. Yours mostly. Riley lunged forward, hand raised like she was about to slap me. Security began to move in. But I didn't flinch. You touch me, I said calmly, and you'll regret it before the press does. She froze, arm midair. We stared at each other. 2 women in expensive gowns, standing above lilies meant for funerals, not weddings. Her hand slowly dropped. That was the difference between us. She fought to gain power. I had simply chosen not to use mine. He'll know. Escort her out, Riley spat, stepping back. Now. One of the guards hesitated. Miss Vaughn, she is still legally. I don't care, she shrieked. She's nothing. A washed up. A low murmur cut through the chaos. Someone shouted from across the courtyard. Look. What are those cars? Heads turned. Phones went up. Even Riley's breath hitched. At the far end of the private drive, a fleet of sleek black sedans began pulling in, their engines smooth, their movement precise. Blacked-out windows. No logos. No media. Just power arriving in unison. Dozens of guests turned, whispering as the line of vehicles rolled forward like a shadow swallowing the light. Riley tried to compose herself. She smoothed her hair, straightened her posture, and motioned toward the arriving convoy, forcing a smile. What a surprise, she said loudly. We weren't expecting anyone else today. Her voice wavered, because even she didn't know who they were. But I did. I stepped away from the wreath, turned toward the cars, and waited. The lead sedan stopped. The driver stepped out quickly, rushed to the back door and opened it. And then he emerged. Victor Monroe. My father. The most powerful businessman in the country. And today my silence is reckoning. The air had shifted. The moment the first black sedan rolled to a stop, the whispers turned into an audible current of panic. Riley's strained smile was frozen across her face, tight and unconvincing as more vehicles followed, one after the other, each more imposing than the last. Matte black. Bulletproof. Unmarked. Moving in silence that commanded attention. No logos. No press vans. Not even the Carter Group's fleet carried that much presence. It wasn't the kind of entrance you planned. It was the kind of entrance people never forgot. A guest nearby dropped their glass. Somewhere behind me a photographer muttered, "Wait. Those plates, that insignia on the windshield." Riley turned to the crowd, trying to regain control of the narrative. Must be more guests, she said too loudly. Yes, I'm sure. Logan must have added them last minute. But I stayed rooted to the marble tiles, hands still calm at my sides. Because I knew exactly who was coming. The man who had stood in the shadows for years, never once interfering, honoring my request for anonymity. My father. Victor Monroe. The lead sedan stopped. The driver jumped out, walked briskly to the back passenger door and opened it with both hands. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark gray mandarin-collared suit, his silver cufflinks discreet but worth more than Riley's entire wedding gown. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed back. His face unreadable. His presence magnetic. Every conversation died. Victor Monroe didn't need introductions. He didn't carry cards. He didn't need guards with earpieces or dramatic announcements. The wealthiest man in the country, one of the richest in the world, didn't require theatrics. He was the headline. Riley's face drained of color. Eyes that, someone gasped. I think it is, oh my God. Victor didn't look at them. He didn't look at Riley. He walked straight toward me. Every guest turned to follow his steps. Riley stepped aside automatically as if pushed by invisible pressure. Her hand gripped the edge of the altar. My father stopped just a few feet from me. His sharp eyes scanned my face, then my arms, then the scene around us. The wreath on the ground, the ring still lying near Riley's feet, the security standing awkwardly frozen. Isla, he said quietly, voice calm but lined with urgency. Did they touch you? I shook my head once. No. Not quite. His expression didn't change, but I knew what that meant. I glanced sideways at Riley. She tried, I said just loud enough. He turned to look at her finally. Riley flinched under the weight of his gaze. Victor raised a single hand. From behind the other cars, half a dozen men in black suits emerged. Calm, professional, emotionless. They weren't security. They weren't police. They were Monroe-trained operatives. The kind of men who handled crises before they became headlines. Two of them moved toward Riley. Wait, what are you doing? She shrieked, stepping back. You can't touch me. This is a wedding. Victor's voice was steady. You attempted to strike a member of my family on private property. That's all I need. I didn't even know she never said. Riley's voice cracked as the men closed in. Exactly, I said flatly. I never said. And you never asked. One of the guards reached into his coat, produced a slim document wallet and handed it to the stunned wedding planner. What is this? The woman murmured. Formal legal clearance. Signed and time-stamped, the guard replied. Under whose authority? Victor Monroe's. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. It was done. The leash had been unfastened. The real war had begun. Riley struggled as the men seized her arms. You can't arrest me. You can't. I'm marrying Logan Carter. He's the CEO. Victor raised an eyebrow. I've seen better CEOs. And better women. Logan will stop this, she screamed. That was the last thing she said before the metal cuffs snapped around her wrists. Her face twisted in horror as she was led down the aisle she had paid a fortune to decorate, dragged past staring guests, silk flowers, and a photographer who was still frozen with his camera halfway to his face. Do something, she screamed at the crowd. Say something. I'm the bride. No one moved. No one spoke. And when she passed the funeral wreath, now resting solemnly at the foot of the altar, even Riley finally fell silent. The crowd was stunned. Not confused anymore, just awestruck. Not a single person moved toward me. Not a single apology was offered. But their eyes said everything. She's not just the ex-wife. She's someone you never mess with. She's Victor Monroe's daughter. I looked at my father, who stood silently at my side. He had always honored my wish to remain unseen. But now it was time to let them look. Let them all see. From behind us, one of the Monroe security agents approached. Sir, the situation is secure. Ms. Vaughn has been removed from the premises. Victor nodded. Good. He turned to me again. Would you like to stay and finish this? I glanced around. There were still photographers. Still executives and investors from Carter's board. Still reporters hiding behind floral arrangements and PR handlers who looked ready to faint. But Logan? He was nowhere in sight. Not yet. No, I said, voice calm. Not yet. Let him come out first. Victor's eyes gleamed with approval. Then we'll wait. And wait we did, standing quietly in the center of the chaos. The wreath still on the floor. The silence still growing. And the ghost of Riley's screams still hanging in the air. The Carter empire had built its wedding on arrogance. But they forgot the one rule of building anything on borrowed ground. Eventually the Real owner comes to collect. The quiet had a sound all its own. It wasn't silence. It was tension. The kind of air that thickens seconds before lightning strikes. You could taste the dread on the guests' tongues, feel it in the shifting feet, the nervous glances, the beads of sweat clinging to the backs of expensive collars. And the grand doors at the far end of the aisle swung open. Logan Carter stepped in, dressed in a custom white tuxedo, lapel flower fresh, hair sculpted with precision. His smile didn't falter at first, not until he took in the frozen guests, the vacant altar, and the crushed funeral wreath lying like a corpse at his feet. He blinked. The first flicker of confusion cracked through. Where's Riley? He asked the crowd, his voice slightly raised. No one answered. His gaze swept left, then right, and then landed on me. And beside me? Victor Monroe. His face went pale. Logan moved forward quickly, shoes clacking against the marble. What the hell is going on here? Still no one answered. He turned fully to me, arms outstretched in disbelief. Isla, what are you doing here? I didn't speak. Not yet. He gestured sharply toward the sedans. And who are all these people? Security? Press? He was spiraling, trying to connect dots that had been invisible to him for 3 years. He didn't even realize his bride was gone. That Riley had already been dragged off in handcuffs, screaming in front of the people who once praised her ambition. Where is she? He demanded again, louder. Where is Riley? I gave him a long, cold look, then turned to my father. Victor nodded once, giving me silent permission. I stepped forward, just enough for the crowd to hear clearly. You used to call me a housemaid, I said, each word sharp and deliberate. Logan blinked, mouth slightly open. I tilted my head. Let me reintroduce myself. The murmurs began again. I didn't stop. My name is Isla Monroe. The guest shifted. I am the only daughter of Victor Monroe, the wealthiest man in this country, and several others. Gasps exploded like fireworks. And you, I said with a cold smile, married nothing. Logan took a step back like I'd slapped him. I could see it in his eyes. All the moments he had dismissed me, all the insults, all the times he'd spoken of my place, while using the money my father funneled into Carter Group to build his own worthless empire. It was sinking in. All of it. You lied to me, he stammered. You never told me who you were. No, I replied, because I wanted to believe you could love someone without calculating their worth. You married me under false pretenses. I laughed. You married me for funding. Don't make this a morality tale now. He looked toward the wreath again. His lips parted. You're the reason we survived that crisis 2 years ago. Yes. You're the reason Jason's board didn't sell off Carter Group. Yes. He stared at my father now as if seeing him for the first time. Victor's hands were calmly folded in front of him. He didn't blink. But why? Logan whispered. Why would you help us? I took another step closer. Because I loved you, I said. And my father trusted me. Logan's throat bobbed. His mouth opened but no words came out. And then, as if the final piece had been placed into a puzzle, Jason Anderson stormed into the courtyard from the far side. Logan, he barked. What the hell is going on? Why is there a media van outside and Riley's name trending in a PR scandal? He looked around, trying to process what had gone wrong. Then his eyes landed on me. And then on the man beside me. His face drained of blood. Victor Monroe stood unmoving, unspeaking, letting the silence do the damage. Jason dropped his phone. He stumbled forward, knees faltering, and to the horror of his board members and VIP guests, he bowed low before me. Miss Monroe, he said breathlessly, we were unaware. The whispers became deafening. He's bowing. Is that Jason Anderson? Bowing to Isla? I didn't return the bow. I didn't need to. Jason straightened slowly, lips trembling, then turned to Logan. And slapped him. Hard. You idiot, he barked. Do you know what you've done? Logan's head snapped sideways from the blow. Jason pointed furiously at me. This woman saved this company. Your mother and I begged you not to insult her. You spat on her like trash and now. He turned to Victor and bowed again. I'm so sorry, sir. We were ignorant. Arrogant. We owe your daughter everything. Victor didn't respond. He didn't need to. Jason turned back to me, breath shaking. Miss Monroe, please, allow us to make amends. Carter Group is yours to command. Say the word, I'll step down. I said nothing. I simply looked at Logan, who had begun trembling ever so slightly, and then turned to my father. Victor gave me a slight nod. The message was clear. Their fate was now mine to decide. The imprint of Jason Anderson's slap still lingered across Logan's cheek. But for once Logan didn't raise his voice. He didn't retaliate. He stood there, silent, stunned, like a man just learning he was disposable in the very empire he once ruled. Jason shook with fury, his voice sharp and slicing. You absolute disgrace. His eyes swept over the crowd, then back to me, then again to the guests who had all gone quiet. The same ones who once whispered that I was just a burden. Now they whispered something else entirely. Not pity. Power. Miss Monroe, Jason said, stepping closer with a humility no one thought him capable of. Please. Let me correct this. I said nothing. My father remained silent beside me, watching like a storm in a tailored suit. Jason gestured to Logan again. I hereby strip Logan Carter of all power, all titles, and his shares in Carter Group. Effective immediately. He turned to the board members gathered in the front rows, most of them wide-eyed and nodding furiously. Record this, he said firmly. Let there be no confusion. The company's legal counsel, a man who had once called me just the wife, quickly stepped forward, scribbling on a legal pad, nodding. Jason looked back at me. The Carter Group owes its survival to you, he said. And we owe our disgrace to my son. Please, tell us what to do. Logan's voice finally cracked through. You're disowning me? He looked like a man who'd lost everything in one breath. You can't, Dad, you can't just. You're not my son, Jason said coldly. Not anymore. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a dropped wine glass. Jason turned to me again, ignoring the desperate figure behind him. Miss Monroe, the Carter Group is yours. I looked at the crumbling empire, the terrified board, the guests who couldn't meet my eyes, and the man I had once loved, now crawling emotionally toward the edge of nothing. And I smiled. But it wasn't cruel. It was controlled. Jason, I said gently. I didn't come to take back the company. But I came to return what was already mine. Silence. I stepped forward, past Logan, past the scattered petals and the ruined altar. Each step felt like a line being redrawn. A new beginning, not revenge but reclamation. I won't press charges, I said softly, facing the guests. Not yet. They all stilled. But don't mistake mercy for weakness. My gaze returned to Logan. If I hadn't returned early, if I hadn't seen that invitation with my own eyes, I would have lost everything in silence. Again. Logan looked down, his voice barely audible. I didn't know. I didn't know who you were. No, I replied. Because you never bothered to ask. I turned to the crowd one final time. Let this be your lesson. A quiet wind swept across the courtyard, rustling the funeral wreath still lying at the foot of the altar. Victor stepped beside me. He nodded once. It was time. I walked away, slowly, deliberately, each step echoing louder than Logan's vows ever had. Behind me, Jason collapsed into a seat, his face in his hands. Logan stood motionless, his white tuxedo stained with shame. The guests didn't stop me. They didn't dare. And as the final sedan door closed behind me, I looked back one last time. The empire they thought was theirs. It was never theirs to begin with. It had been 5 years. 5 years since I walked away from the ruins of the Carter wedding. 5 years since Jason Anderson bowed before me, since Logan's empire crumbled at my feet, since the name Isla Monroe stopped being a whisper and became a headline. In that time I rebuilt everything they tried to take from me. And I built more. Victor eventually retired, quietly, gracefully, handing over the Monroe conglomerate to me not through blood but through merit. I didn't inherit the throne. I earned it. They still write about that day. They still replay the video footage. The fleet of cars, the funeral wreath, the handcuffs, and Logan Carter's stunned silence when I said, "You married nothing." I hadn't seen him since. Until today. The conference room at Monroe Global's West Tower had floor-to-ceiling glass and silence so thick it magnified every breath. It was my favorite room, the kind you earned, not borrowed. My assistant had buzzed in only once. "There's someone here asking to speak with you, Miss Monroe. He doesn't have an appointment." I didn't need a name. The voice had changed, but I recognized the weight. "Send him in," I said. And now here he was. Logan Carter. But not the Logan I remembered. This one looked smaller, not just in posture but in soul. His once pristine suits were gone, replaced by a plain blazer and slacks that had seen better days. His eyes were tired, his face unshaven, the weight of time etched into his every feature. But the most striking thing? He wasn't alone. A little girl stood beside him, no more than 4 years old. She had chestnut hair and pigtails, wide gray eyes that held too much understanding for someone her age, and a quiet, curious expression. My eyes went to hers first, then to his, then back to hers. She looked like Riley, but she didn't carry Riley's eyes. She carried something softer, quieter, and somehow, something of mine. Not blood but grief. Recognition. Reflection. Miss Monroe, Logan began, voice hoarse. Thank you for seeing me. He hadn't called me Isla. He knew better now. I said nothing. I lost everything, he continued, after that day. Your father's disownment, the shareholder revolt, the lawsuits, Riley's name being blacklisted from every firm. I remember, I said calmly. She left me, he added. Not long after the child was born. My eyes didn't blink. His did. I've raised her alone. Pause. She doesn't know her mother. Or what happened. I haven't told her. I looked down at the little girl again. She wasn't scared. Felt brave. Almost too brave for someone so small. What's your name? I asked gently. The girl beamed. Emery. Emery, I repeated. Logan whispered, She knows about you. I told her you were the kindest person her mom had ever hurt. And that you still forgave us. I didn't forgive you, I said calmly but truthfully. Logan's head lowered. But I never blamed her, I added. Not entirely. Not in the end. Emery took a step forward. She pulled something from behind her, a folded paper. A crayon drawing. It showed 3 people. A girl with pigtails, a tall woman in a purple dress, and a man holding a flower. The woman was labeled Auntie. The man had no name. I drew this, Emery said proudly. Because Daddy said you were the best person ever. She pointed at the smiling figure. That's you. I smiled faintly. Thank you. When I grow up, she said, I'm gonna be smart like you. I'm gonna help people and be nice to them. And I'm gonna take care of Daddy. Her voice was small. But steady. Logan wiped his face with a trembling hand. I didn't come here for anything, he said. No money. No second chances. He looked up at me broken and bare. I just wanted you to see her once. She insisted. I stared at him. Then at the child who still held my drawing in 2 small fists. I bent slightly and placed a hand over Emery's. You are already kind, I said softly. And that's more powerful than most people ever become. She nodded solemnly like she understood the weight of kindness. I looked at Logan. She's not your punishment. He swallowed. I know. She's your reminder. Every day. His eyes brimmed. That's why I named her Emery. After merit. Because love should be earned. I rose slowly. She's your chance, I said. Not mine. Logan took her hand and I watched them walk away. Not because I wanted to stop them. But because I finally didn't need to. Behind them, the sun caught the edge of the drawing. The purple dress, the smiling auntie, the girl in pigtails. A child drawn into a new world. One where kindness wasn't weakness and legacy wasn't stolen. I watched them walk away. Logan and the child that could have been mine in another life. Emery. She was hope in soft curls and pigtails. A fragile, wide-eyed piece of innocence caught between my past and his consequence. She deserved better. I just wasn't the one to give it. Not anymore. They reached the door when Logan paused. He turned slowly, clutching Emery's hand. She really wanted to meet you, he said. I know, I replied. She thinks you're magic. I gave a faint smile. That's because she hasn't seen the damage I can do. Logan's expression faltered. I wanted to say thank you again. For not. Don't, I said gently but firmly. He swallowed hard, nodded, then knelt beside Emery to tie her shoelace. She looked back at me, shy but bright. Will I see you again, Auntie? I crouched to her level and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. If you ever need me, I said, you'll know where to find me. Then I stood. My gaze shifted to Logan, hollow eyes, trembling fingers, tired heart. But no longer my problem. You were lucky, I said. He looked up startled. Lucky that I returned early, I continued. Lucky that invitation made it into my hands. Lucky that I walked into the boardroom that day before you signed away everything in my name. Logan said nothing. You were one signature away from destroying me, I said. And you didn't even know it. He took a step forward. I didn't know who you were. No, I cut him off. You just didn't care. That silenced him. I took a slow step forward, closing the gap between us. Not for affection, not for closure. Just to make sure he heard me. Every word. There is no second chance, I said, eyes locked on his. No future where we reconcile. No version of reality where I forget what you and your family did. His lips parted to speak, but I raised a finger and silenced him again. You don't get to rewrite the past. Not with apologies. Not with tears. Not with a daughter who deserves better than either of us. He flinched. I leaned in closer. And let me be very, very clear, Logan Carter, I whispered. If the Andersons ever forget this lesson. I paused. I will erase your name from history. I stepped back. Not out of mercy. Out of power. He stood there stunned. Emery blinked up at him, confused by the shift in air. I hope she becomes someone better, I said, glancing once more at the child. Someone kind. Someone strong. Someone who never has to burn to learn her worth. Then I turned. And walked away. By the time I exited the tower, the press was already gathered outside. My security swept forward like a black tide, parting the cameras and microphones. But this time no one shouted Logan. No one asked for a Carter statement. The only name they called was mine. Ms. Monroe. Isla, look this way. How does it feel to be Forbes Woman of the Decade? I didn't stop. But I let them see me, head high, back straight, legacy intact. Later that night at the National Honors Gala, I stood before the gilded entrance of the Monroe Foundation building. The hall was glittering with names, CEOs, leaders, foreign delegates. But above them all, suspended on a towering vertical banner, was a magazine cover. My magazine cover. A bold black and white photograph. My eyes unflinching. My hands folded. Beneath it, in embossed gold lettering. The woman who walked away from the empire she built, and was strong enough to build her own. I smiled. Not because I needed the validation, but because I had earned the ending they tried to write without me. And I had rewritten it. On my own terms. The end.